Hello and welcome back to Hare in the Hawthorn. This is part two of our 100th episode. So we're now technically on our 101 episode, but we've just had a internet cable connection instability message. So we've just been praying to the fairies and the gods that we were going to get through this today, and I'm hopefully that's been heard out in the ether, because when we recorded the first part, not gonna lie, we had an absolute meltdown. Never ever been kicked off of a Zoom platform before, but it was that unstable that they booted us off, which prompted me to go out and buy a new laptop. So it's cost me a pretty penny yesterday's episode, which probably you're watching back to back, so that makes no sense at all. So yeah, we're still celebrating the 100th episode. We're also going to sneak it in there. I want you to all wish my lovely co-host Neil a happy birthday, for it's his birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday for tomorrow, Neil.
Well, by the time this goes out, it might be my birthday. I don't know when it's
Yes,
going
it
to
will
go
be
out, but
tomorrow. So the 27th it'll go out. So on
so
your
so that
birthday.
that that magic day, the 27th of September, the most important day of the year, obviously.
Obviously, definitely, for more reasons than one, because it's
Yeah.
our 100th episode, your birthday, and I'm getting a new laptop. So cheers to that. So
Cheers. And just in case anyone's wondering, I'm 35 for the 20th year running.
that's good. 35's good. It's a good age, 35. We should all stick at that. I think over the age of 30, and you do get into that more mellow aspect of life, and yeah, less caught up with you do what you do. I think if you look back at no, let's not do this, right?
Yeah. Come on, get on with it.
Yeah, I'll get on with it. I'll get on with it. So we were cut off abruptly while we were talking about the incredible Josh Kutchins. We will be getting back to Josh's work and his input into Hare in the Hawthorn shortly, but we wanted to start this off fresh. So I'm going to give a really, really quick review of some very early guests. And as I was contemplating these guests and the whole of Hare in the Hawthorn earlier on today, I suddenly had this realization that I've probably learnt more from Hare in the Hawthorn than I had from paying out thousands of pounds to go to university. So I want to thank all our guests for giving me a better education than the British education system ever did. Without further ado, we mentioned David Wells yesterday, the lovely David Wells, and I did say that I will be doing a chat with Neil about David Wells to get his perspective on an incident that happened, including David Wells. So the next guest that we had on, I met the next guest, Julie Phelps, in a roundabout kind of way through the fairies, but actually our discussion took a mind-bending turn. And I remember talking to her with utter shock, utter shock. And we spoke about her experiences with UAPs, I think they're now technically known as. So, and her interactions with aliens. So I was literally, I couldn't get my head around the interactions that this lady had had. And I had spoken to her for months and months before about the fairy realm. So I trusted what she was saying. But was like, after I came off of the actual talk with her, I was like, blinking hell, just this woman's had to move around the country because of her experiences with aliens, and had experienced alien abduction, but not in the way that you think. So get yourself on and have a look at that one. And you can see my face going, what? So that was definitely a crazy one. Not long after that, I spoke to Morgan Daimler, who's over in the USA, and we talked about the books that she was writing, and particularly the fairy faith in Ireland. We also chatted about ghosts and what ghosts were, and we talked about modern witchcraft, and they were the kind of predominant subjects from that one. Ashley Mortimer was my next guest. Now, Ashley's quite high up in the Wiccan circles. And I was that nervous about interviewing at that time, as I've said. He cracks this amazing joke right at the very, very beginning of the interview. And because I am that focused, mono-focused on my questions, it just goes straight over my head. And it wasn't until afterwards, till somebody pointed out and went, that was really quite funny, that I was like, oh, and I looked really rude. So we talked about, he'd been on Help My House is Haunted in the first series, I think it was. And he had talked to that team about some elves that were residing in a wood within Nottinghamshire. And that was a really interesting conversation. I met up with him after that interview and went to these woods that are quite guarded, where he goes and does ritualistic type work. But definitely want to catch up with. He's also got a really good YouTube channel where he plays the guitar and is just generally hilarious. And I watched him all the way through the lockdowns because he just made me giggle. He's a magical man, a magical man. We got even more serious after that, and I became even more nervous. And I don't know how this happened, but I managed to get Turner Art Prize winner Mark Leckie on to sit down and talk to me about his encounter that he had with a pixie that shaped his art career. And I'd seen an article, I don't even know where I'd seen the article, probably one of the art magazines, about how he'd had this encounter and how it had influenced him throughout his artwork. And that blew my mind, that he said yes, he'd come and sit and talk to me about that experience. After that, we had the start of we had the start of the Help My House is Haunted team, and we have the lovely Jane Harris on, who is one of the presenters of Help My House is Haunted, who has got a really good knowledge base of the paranormal, witchcraft, herbalism, etc. So that was a really lovely chat. I'm whipping through these, and I'm sorry, I've had this awful cough for a few weeks. It's not COVID, by the way. Not that I know. Anyway, so the next guest. Now, this is one of those guests that I toed and froed whether to even put out the video, because he disturbed me quite a lot. He is an American investigator, paranormal investigator, hugely controversial over there, and has crackled a lot of people about his methodology. And just to give you a little bit of insight, he'd gone to a particularly haunted location, I think it was Bobby Mackey's, and gone into where there was supposedly a demonic portal and bloodlet. So he cut himself basically and bloodlet into that particular portal space, which was shocking enough. But during this interview, he did say that he was looking into the legalities of going to another location and shooting himself to elicit some response, because there had been a famous shooting there, which I talked to him afterwards and said, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? This is crazy. And he'd gone so far as to ask the local police whether it would be illegal for him to maim himself with a gun during this experiment. He was just on the fringes, but it was a really interesting insight. And I know he was quite high profile at that particular time within the community. Lightened up the mood afterwards, we had Barry Guy, who is a good friend of mine, also my boss at Goes Find a Paranormal Society, Goes Find a Paranormal Events. And it was about that time when Barry really came round to the notions of fairies as part of a haunted environment. So we talked through all the kind of newness of that, which is, it was really nice. It was really very friendly chat, that one was. Then we had the very first Thomas Sheridan interview. And
well, don't say too much about Thomas, because I want to talk
yes,
about Mr. Sheridan in a moment.
we could say so much. The only thing I will say, I won't talk through what we talked about as a topic, but on an empathetic level, I remember looking at Thomas for about the first 10-15 minutes of that interview thinking, he really doesn't like me. I don't know whether he's going to open up. I don't know. He's really sussing me out. He was very polite and very amenable and very as Thomas is, very knowledgeable, but I could feel him doing that weighing scale thing with me, and luckily I fell on the right side of the scales with Thomas, and he has become a good friend of ours and a good friend of the show. So yeah, thank goodness for that. And it
Yeah,
was
well, well,
God,
for what you saying about the scales, Thomas, like myself, is a
he's a
Libra,
Libra.
so he knows how to weigh people up. He can do that.
Yeah, I'm so glad I fell on the right side of Thomas, because I mean, not only is he an incredibly knowledgeable person, and just a plethora of subjects, not just the fairies, but just any subject, and he just seems to be able to not only pull it out of the bag, but critically think on so many different levels about so many different subjects. And he's such a great guy. He's a great guy to be around. And luckily, me and Neil and a few others will be having a few bevies with him in about a month's time, which will be nice. Catch up with him. So I'm going to park Thomas there, so you can have a discussion about that. In complete contrast, my next guest was one of the Fairy Investigation Society members. I put a shout out on there and said, does anybody want to come on and chat fairies with me? And I'm going to get this wrong because it's one of those words with my dyslexia and a slight speech impediment. It makes it really hard. Karl Hieronymus Baron Munchausen. I think I got it right.
That's right.
I,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that's going to be a pseudonym for him. I don't think that's his actual name, but if I remember rightly, he was from Holland. Um, he was an absolute delight and took great pleasure in showing me around his beautiful collection of different vintage fairies and gnomes and trolls that he'd collected. He's such a flamboyant character, often seen in top hats, and Victorian regalia, and that was such a beautiful, refreshing sort of chat that we had there. After that, we had a guest who I've known for many, many years. We had Neil Gaddis Ward, and I first met Neil Gaddis Ward, God, it must be about 20 years ago now, as part of Karen Kay's Three Wishes festival that happens in the UK. And he is a very fine artist. And at the time, he was working specifically on fairy and folklore paintings. And that's when I first met him. Fast forward about 15 years after that, I bumped into him in a pub. I'd gone to, I can't remember what the title of it was. I was going to things like Skeptics in the pub at the time, and it didn't have that title, but it was very, very similar. So it was looking at 14 topics, and I walked in and I was like, that's Neil Gaddis Ward. It was just very bizarre, and it was in, a county that I didn't associate with him. So that was all very weird. But again, Neil has a massive knowledge of all things 14. And so we talked about ghosts, fairies, time travel, mediumship, UAPs, aliens, the whole gambit. So, and I ended up on his show and doing one of my longest shows, which was a 2-hour. So after that, we'd got Patti Negri, who is of Ghost Adventures fame. So she is somebody who goes on as a medium and a witchy help on Ghost Adventures. She's also, I think, at the minute doing Phantasma tours. I'll have to double check that in this country. So she does come to the UK to do witchcraft type tours and looking at different kind of phenomena. So lovely lady, really lovely lady. And we kind of touched on talking about dragons, which we haven't done really. I don't think we haven't. It's not something that part of the fairy realm that we've looked at. Maybe we should park that and look at that in the future. Just a thought there. Then we had Karen Kay. Karen Kay needs very little introduction. Karen Kay is literally the queen of the UK fairies and merfolk. Karen has been working incredibly hard for decades on elevating people's fairy experiences, whether it be at fairy fairs or at festivals. She also is the editor of Fae magazine in this country. Wonderful woman. Go and check out her work. Then we had the first of two reverends. We had the Reverend Peter Law, who is a writer for 14 Times, and he does a column in 14 Times about horror and horror movies. He's also got, I think, 3 books now. I may be wrong, within the horror genre. And we started off chatting about how on earth does a reverend land up not only talking but writing about horror. So that was the start of that conversation. Really intriguing. It's a really intriguing interview. Very clever guy, very interesting. He's got a podcast that's just shot through the roof. He's gone from like few hundred followers to 50,000, I think, overnight, and he's building and building and building. So, you know, fair play. He's been doing it for a very long time, so he deserves that. Then I started after that on my Irwin quest of rants, and that was followed by Jamie Cato, the lovely Jamie Cato, who we talked about spiritualism, mushrooms, amongst other things. And Jamie Cato he'd hate the term spiritual guru. I think he would hate that term. I read, and I can't remember the name of the book. I can see it's got an axolotl on the front. It'll come to me, which is about unlocking yourself, basically. And he talks in that book, which I will always take this with me. He says, don't ever lock your demons up. Sit them down and have a cup of tea. You know, give them the boundaries. They are part of you. They're not external to you. If you lock them up, they'll rattle the cage, and when they come out, they'll come out grizzly. So that was something that I definitely took from his work. Had the lovely guys from the Haunt magazine after that. They spoke about the magazine, the start of the magazine, people who contribute to it, etc. Another tricky one for me was next, which was Marco Visconti. And it wasn't tricky because of Marco, because he was a really good guest, a really easy guest. But he talked about Thelema and about his time in what I can only describe as a Crowleyan cult, and the horrendous experiences that he had from that. I didn't know anything about Thelema. I knew a bit about Crowley, but it was something that I avoided for a very long time, looking into Aleister Crowley's work. So that's definitely one to have a look at if that's your interest. We saw the start of, I had a short burst of people wanting to express their experiences, and we had a lady called Sarah who shared her experience of a glittering globe. We had James Ewing, who spoke. James's work's beautiful, by the way. He's an artist and craftsman. And he talked about a shapeshifter, which I didn't expect from him. So all these experiences that came on to talk to me about what they'd encountered, I told them beforehand, please don't give me any clue about what you've experienced, because I want to experience your story firsthand. In between that, we had Lee Thatcher. Lee Thatcher's become a really good friend of mine, and he is my go-to when it comes to UFOs, UAPs, aliens. I'll often sort of text him and say, just seeing this up in the sky, do you know what it is? And he'll get back to me and say, yeah, it's the space station going over Cape, get a grip, you know. So lovely guy. He knows his stuff. He does know his stuff. And I have been saying to him, I've got to get him back on and have a chat about things. And that takes us up pretty much, you know, I may have missed out one or two, but that takes us pretty much up to your first interview when you first joined, which is a good leap off. And before I lose my voice completely, a good leap off to go back to part 1 and to finish off what we're talking about with Joshua.
Yes, no, absolutely. Of course, yeah. So that's taken. I haven't seen all of these podcasts that you did. Some of them ring a bell. And yeah, you know, before I came on board, and then as we talked about in the first part of this 100th special, Um, my first one was David Luke, and
Yeah.
obviously we've already talked about that, but I believe that we were up to Joshua Kutchen, and we just started to talk about Joshua Kutchen when everything went wrong. So if Josh, if you're watching this, really sorry that it was you. Actually, it might have had something to do with you, this cutting off when I started to talk about it. So I hope it doesn't happen again. But Joshua Kutchen has been on twice.
Mhm.
And the first time was just after he'd published his enormous magnum opus, Ecology of Souls, like three, well, two and a half sort of volumes, um, uh, enormous work. And Josh's thing, sorry if I'm repeating this from the first part, but basically Josh's outlook is that a lot of these phenomena, such as ghosts and UFOs, Bigfoot, Sasquatch as they call it, and fairies, and even demons,
Mm.
are all the same phenomenon. That at least they're coming from the same place,
Mhm.
and the way they are represented is purely reliant on human consciousness and how that human consciousness transacts with
Mhm.
that particular phenomenon. So that's his sort of big thing, something which I'm very much on board with. I think he's got it, and he writes beautifully about it, and he talks beautifully about it as well. He's a very articulate guy, very. You just want to go out for a drink with
Yeah.
Josh, and that's he's an absolute great guy. And if you remember, Kate, that first one, he also did the best impression I've ever heard of Terence McKenna.
He did. He did.
I'm bungee jumping into the Bardo. That's my impression. That's not quite as good as Josh's. So that was great. And the second time he came on, he was talking about his then recently published novel, which is "Them Old Ways Never Died," which is basically fairies in the Appalachian Mountains, and it's quite a read. It's a great novel. It's really good, and it's not just a fairy novel. It's very urbane in many
Mm.
ways, and there's a big build up to it. It's a very long novel, um, and I wrote the blurb on the back of it, and yeah, so yeah, so Josh is great. I'm sure he'll be back. Did you have any memories specifically about Joshua's appearances?
I think for me, the ecology of souls, so that very first interview that we did, um, I think ecology of souls is, and I've only got volume one because I haven't got round to absorbing volume one yet to buy volume two. It is the book, I think, that the world has been waiting for. And no matter where I go, if I'm talking at paranormal events or if I'm chatting with people from, I say, whatever you're into, UFOs, fairies, ghosts, whatever you're into, get this book because it stitches all those ideas that come from things like the holographic universe and the Eighth Tower and John Keel stuff and blah, blah, blah. And it stitches everything together and more. It expands that out. So that, like I was saying earlier about, university hasn't got a patch on the guests that we have. Um, that was definitely a great gift for
Yep.
me from Josh.
Yep, no, it's great. Like I say, hopefully Josh will come back in the future. So um, next after that is Thomas Sheridan. So we're back to Thomas Sheridan talking about. He'll love us talking about him.
I know.
All of this stuff. And Thomas he came on for the second time with just you and I, and then also a third time with Sarah Mondaini,
Yeah.
who Thomas does the podcast Hocus Focus with, and they were talking about Hocus Focus, and I think um, most people viewing this will know what Hocus Focus is and have seen it.
And
Where
if you
Tom,
don't, if you've not heard of it, go and check it out because it's Hare and the Hawthorn on steroids. They are way more professional than us.
oh yeah, they wouldn't be messing around with two parts to a podcast, would they? They stitch it together and edit it, and Sarah's
Yeah.
very good at this. So Thomas Sheridan, I mean, what can you say about the guy? He's a kind of occult superstar.
He's a legend. He is a
from
legend.
from Ireland, and a real polymath in
Mm.
terms of just so much knowledge from so many different areas. a lot of you will have seen the podcast that he just does from his car, and it's like it's the subject material that he's embracing, from conspiracy theories to aliens to fairies to folklore to megalithic monuments to history. It's just it's incredibly impressive. And when he came on to Hare and Hawthorn, he did his stuff. I remember it was very useful for me, because at that time I was just sort of writing a piece about prehistoric monuments and the fairies. What's the correlation? And the conversation we had with Thomas was actually just crystallized a few of my ideas about that. And so that's what I remember as being extremely useful. But Thomas is, as Kate has already said, Thomas is actually giving a talk in Glastonbury next month in October, where we will be there. It's the weekend of the Fairy Fair, and Thomas and
Maria Wheatley.
what's her name? Jake?
Maria Wheatley.
Maria Wheatley are giving are giving a double header in the assembly rooms at Glastonbury, so we'll be along there. So it'll be great to catch up with Thomas.
Can I just
Sarah
interject there that Thomas isn't at the Fairy Fair. It's not given a talk at the Fairy. It's just a coincidence. So the Fairy Fair is something that I go to twice a year. But I don't know whether I'd love or hate to give a speech at talk at the Fairy Fair. But no, he's.
Oh, I'm sure he would. But no, Thomas is. Sorry, I should have made that clear that he's giving a talk at the Alternative View. Well, it's not conference, but Alternative View is this thing that started up by Ian R. Crane, who many of you will know, and has gathered momentum, and UK Column, 21st Century Wire are sort of involved in it. And this is just a little sort of event on the day.
Yes.
I'm sure he'll dress up as a fairy though.
Challenge on, Thomas. Challenge on.
So Thomas is a very good friend of the channel, and the 3 times that he's been on, and the once with Sarah Montaini, they've been the biggest views.
Yes, of course they have.
Podcast, because Thomas has a big catchment area, and if he puts it out on his social media, everyone just goes. I mean, they're not coming to see me and Kate; they're coming to see what Thomas has to say, obviously. But yeah,
I like to think that they kind of liked us.
So there's Thomas and Sarah, and it will be great to catch up with them. They're great people and doing great work. And I should also just say that Hocus Focus book has just come out.
Yes.
It was published just earlier this month. So, and I wrote the foreword to the book, and obviously no one reads the foreword, but definitely go and read the book, because there's a mass of information in there. It just covers so much. It really does. And so again, Thomas and Sarah, we hope to have them back on again. We want to do a book review with them, so hopefully they'll agree to come back on in the relatively near future. Now, another returning friend of Hare and the Hawthorn is everybody's favorite reverend. It's Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe. And I remember, as Kate will obviously remembers as well, back in the 90s, when 4TN TV was on, I can't remember which channel was it on.
It was channel 4.
And that's how I knew Lionel. And so, as far as I'm concerned, well, he's a bit of a superstar, riding around his motorcycle and just, very good presenter. And then to be honest, I'd forgotten about Lionel over the years and whatever. And then Kate said, "I've got Reverend Lionel, the Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe," and I was like, "Really? Are you sure?" he's quite famous, and he came on, and twice. We did 2 in relatively quick succession, didn't we? We were talking about time slips. We were talking about his visits to haunted castles in Germany. Also the thing that sticks in my mind, the time slips thing, because he's quite big on that, isn't he? And he tells some very good stories, and he's so articulate, and he's a great storyteller. So all you have to do is said, "Oh, Lionel, do you remember that time slip story?" And then boom, off he goes, telling this wonderful story for the next 20 minutes. But Lionel was absolutely lovely, absolutely brilliant. I loved those conversations with him, and I know that Kate knows him better than I. He wrote the foreword to your second edition of your book, didn't he?
It is, yes, he did. And I had the opportunity, and I was like a giddy schoolgirl. I had the opportunity to go and have a cup of tea at the vicarage. Well, not the vicarage, but his house. And let me tell you, Lionel is no different behind closed doors as he is, on screen. He also did with us a past life regression, which was so sweet. It was so sweet, where he talked about. I kind of wanted him to be a really big Knights Templar type character, because that's very much in the vein of Lionel. But he turned out to be a farm worker, a shepherd, and it was more than fitting for the personality of who Lionel is now. So that was a really sweet one to be involved in.
That's great. Lionel is an absolute star, and that's a beautiful segue onto the next guest, who was Paul Goddard,
Yes.
who did that regression. That's what Paul Goddard does, amongst other things. And shortly after he did a past life regression with both Kate and I, he came on Hare and Hawthorn just to talk about it. How he does it, his experiences, and that was very interesting, and probably something quite different
Mm,
for the usual Hare and Hawthorn. I mean, we weren't talking about entities of any sort. It was purely about personal experiences
mm,
of potentially having past life through the regression,
mm,
and also talking very openly about all the problems with that, all of the sort of kickback that you will get to saying, "Oh, well, this is a past life. Is it a past life? Or are you remembering something from a novel that you've read? Is this just deeply subconscious stuff?" Which is all, perfectly
mm,
legitimate concerns about past life regression. But and he's very open
mm,
about that. But having, as I say, Kate and I both have done the regression. When it happened to me, it was a very dreamlike experience, and because I was not expecting it to work. I was, no, this isn't going to work. You can't hypnotize me, especially over video. And then within 5 minutes, it's like, whoa. In 5 minutes, I was in 19th century Dorset, and Bob's your uncle. But yes, so Paul was great.
Yeah, and I've a lot of time for Paul. He's a very open human being, to all kinds of different aspects of 14 phenomena, human phenomena, and very accepting of, there is never any judgment that comes from him. When I've seen him do past life regressions, this life regressions with people, he is just so he's got a really healing quality to him, in the fact that he's got an acceptance that, yeah, that's your experience, let's go through it, let's explore it, which I think makes him an incredibly good regressionist. So yeah, and he's a lovely bloke.
Yeah, he certainly is. Next up was Bob Digby, who I'd never heard of before. And this was primarily a chat about UFOs.
Yes.
And I think Bob probably takes a bit of a different view than Kate and I about what UFOs are. He's a bit more of a materialist. Not exclusively. He's very broad-minded and open-minded as to what they could potentially be. But whereas I would say that UFOs are not nuts and bolts spacecraft coming from outer space, they are
Mm-hmm.
part of us. They're part
Yeah.
of a greater consciousness that we're experiencing under certain conditions. And Bob, I think, was open to that, but he was talking mostly about, he's talking about underground bases
Mm.
in America, and how the US military has been
Yes.
dealing with the UFO phenomenon. But I think it was an interesting chat, and again, very different, really, than the usual kind of
Mm.
things that we're talking about on Hare and Hawthorn.
Yeah, I know that Bob had also wanted to talk with us about remote viewing. That's very much his hot topic. and that was the thing that I was most interested in talking to him about. And it's been one of those. He wants to come back, we want him back on, and it's just been timing's not been right, and unfortunately he's been a little bit poorly recently. So at the stage when he's feeling fit and well to get back on, then we would definitely love to, remote viewing is definitely something that I'm really interested in. So it'd be great to have him back to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so same here. Remote viewing is it's so mind blowing. Sort of it, especially the stuff with Ingo Swann, which I've read several of his books, absolutely blowing my mind. So it would be great to have Bob Digby back on to talk about remote viewing.
Yeah.
But back in on our sort of within our more within our comfort zone is the great Dr. Simon Young.
Yes, bless him.
Again, not much need for an introduction to Dr. Simon Young. You will know who he is. The Secretary of the Fairy Investigation
Let's
Society,
give him his.
producer.
Hold on. Let's give him his proper title first. He is the Godfather. He's the fairy Godfather. Let's give him his
All
proper
right.
title.
All right. We do have permission from Simon to call him the Fairy Godfather.
He
as well,
loves
so,
it.
Simon is, again, obviously an academic who writes primarily about the folklore of the British Isles, but beyond as well, America as well, and Europe. And his, putting together for the Fairy Investigation Society these two censuses, which we've talked about so many times and will continue to do so on Hare and the Hawthorn. It's an enormous amount of work for which he gets nothing in financial reward for it. It's a pure labor of love that he's put these enormous censuses with over 1,000 reports together. Amount of work that's gone into this is just what beyond me. I don't want to think about it. And meanwhile, holding down an academic career as a lecturer and writing article after article. Simon is so strong on the folklore. If I can't think of anyone else who is as hardcore strong on the folklore as Simon Young. But he'll also, obviously, if he's looking at modern fairy encounters, he wants to go beyond the folklore, and so but Simon will always stop a little bit before he gets into too esoteric territory. Kate and I are always trying to sort of wind him up even, and to try and say, well, what are the fairies? Are they non-material beings that are part of a greater consciousness? And Simon will sort of sit back in his chair and go, well, that could be the case. and he's absolutely marvelous. And we were talking a little bit about the Cottingley fairies as well, because there is a volume coming out edited by Simon. It's coming out at the beginning of October, and both Kate and I have articles in that book, along with other very good authors. There's 12 authors writing from various aspects of the amazing Cottingley story. Anyone who thinks the Cottingley story is just two girls having a bit of a joke and photographing cardboard cutouts of fairies, they were doing that, but it goes way beyond that. The story is way beyond that and much deeper. And Simon, as he does, he's compiled all of these authors' essays, including Kate and I's, and I will recommend that to anyone who's interested in that story, because I think it's an important volume that he's bringing out next month. So we were talking a little bit about that as he was putting it together. So yeah, Simon's a great guest.
I think definitely when that book's out, we will do a Cottingley special. It's something that I know that I've particularly circumnavigated with Just Cause as well. It's one of those. I don't know why, but I have I've got quite an aversion to the Cottingley fairies, and it's something that I'd like to get to the bottom of. And it definitely reflected when I was writing writing the essay for that book. I found it very, very difficult. I found it very, very difficult. So we'll have a Cottingley special, but don't expect it to be all twee and British summertime scones and frilly dresses. We'll be looking at it.
Well, we could do that as well. We could do that part of it. That's part of it, part of the story.
Yeah, sit around with scones and tea.
So Dr. Simon Young, absolutely fantastic, and we would definitely have him back on. We need to get him back on to talk about the second census
Yes.
as well. So maybe when we get him back on, we'll talk about the second census and the Cottingleys together. So look out for that. Watch this space. Barbara Fisher, another of our American friends.
Brilliant
Barbara
interview.
Fisher she's great. She's an artist, a very good artist. Some of her art, when she puts it up on Facebook, it's like, oh wow, I need to use that as the image from the next article, and she's allowed me to do so several times. But she also runs the website called 6 Degrees of John Keel. You all know who John Keel is, and of course John Keel was one of the first people, along with Jack Valet, who were talking about, well, aren't aliens and the fairies the same thing, or at least very similar thing? One of the first. In fact, I can't think of anyone who was talking about that before those two. And that's where Barbara's coming from. So very much in the vein of Joshua Kutchen. Barbara knows Joshua very well, and actually she edited his novel. So they know each other very well, and they're very much aligned on this thing about the phenomenon is coming from the same place. And that was mostly what we were talking about with Barbara, as well as her art. And she was showing us some of her artwork, and I think there were some comments saying how fantastic the artwork is. So we're very pleased to have her on, and again, I'm sure she'll return.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I mean, she inspired me on two levels. It was a lovely. It wasn't just a lovely chat. It was a really informative chat. But her art sort of led me back to working with watercolors. I hadn't worked with watercolors for many years, and just her talking about her process of how she worked, and it has a playfulness, but at the starting point there is no starting point. She just plays and sees what comes out of that play, which is something that I forget to do with my work, definitely. But the other aspect is something that you mentioned earlier, is we talked about Appalachia, and I have got this real big draw at the minute, real big draw to go there. So if there's any TV companies out there that want to take me and Neil over to America to do a program about Appalachia, then we know some people out there too who would be brilliant. So, or if anybody wants to set up a crowdfund and send us out there to do a Hare and the Hawthorn from America, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll get Josh and Barbara involved. They're there. They can give us the local tours. Yeah, no, I know what you mean about Appalachia. I mean, it's a strange ambience to the place, or at least I perceive that strange ambience. I've only been to the sort of north part of the Appalachians before, but
Have you been? You've
it would be good to
been?
go. There's an idea. We could have a yeah. Many years ago, as I always say, many years ago, it was 1990, 1991. Oh God, that's showing me age, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Moving swiftly on to the most recent guest that we've had, and again, got a little bit of a different outlook that we got from this guest who Kate got in touch with, and this is Samuel Hurley. And Samuel is a poet, and a very good poet, but I can't remember his website. Can you remember his website, Kate?
Yeah, I think if you just put Samuel Hurley in, it'll and poet after it'll bring it up.
Sorry, I should have had that.
Oh no, it's
down,
yeah, but it's not the name of his book, is it? You've got to remember the name of his book.
Right. I don't usually do this on the podcast, but I've got to go and find his book, which I bought. Just hold on. Talk amongst yourselves.
Oh well, I'll keep chatting. while he's finding the book, I've got to mention a few people that from the para world that we had on in between. So we had Lauren Jones, who is my paranormal pirate sister, who is lovely. Go and check out her work. We also had Kev Kerr recently, who we talked about para ethics, and Dr. Kate Gerald, and we talked about Gothic literature. So yeah, check those out. But they're more of the spooky side. So I thought I'd say those while Neil was away getting the book out, so he doesn't get scared.
So, Samuel, Samuel's a great guy. I absolutely love him. And don't you say bromance.
There is a bromance. I remember when I said to you, I found this.
So,
No, let me tell this. I said to you, I found this poet, and you were like, I know my poetry, and you do. And I knew that you would love this guy's work. And you were going, well, I'll be the judge of that, blah, blah. And then it was just like, you could see little stars in your eyes.
well, it was as soon as we were on, actually before we started the podcast, and we were chatting, and I was like, you do agree that Lord Byron is the greatest poet in the English language, don't you? And he was, yeah, of course I do. Yeah, I'm a great Byron fan. As soon as he said that, okay, I'm on side with you. It's any fan of Lord Byron is a friend of mine. So I got the book, bought the book, signed copy, and it is called An Anthem for the Dreaming Lost. Brilliant title. And the I can't recommend it enough. You know, I'm not into modern poetry. I don't like much modern poetry. I am, you know, anything that happened after about 1850 is usually not fantastic, with some noble exceptions to that. But this is great. And before I got the book, I was listening to Samuel read out some of his poetry, as he does on his Instagram channel primarily. And he's a very good reader of poetry. It's very difficult to actually read poetry without coming across as melodramatic. And his poetry is beautiful. Some of it's very sad. It's very deep. And the way he reads it out is just beautifully done. And I thoroughly recommend, as we did when we were talking to him, thoroughly recommend people either go and get the book or go along and just view him reading out poems on Instagram. And he read one of the poems during the podcast, and a lot of people in the comments were saying, oh my goodness, that's absolutely beautiful, really sad beautiful. So we love Samuel.
We do. There's a raw and beautiful melancholy to his work that just hits you. There is such an honesty, a deep and slightly uncomfortable honesty in his work. But we didn't just get him on because I knew that Neil would love having him on. I spoke to him about magic, and particularly fairy folk. And I just dropped in the question and said, you know, are you a believer? And he said, you know, absolutely, I'm a believer, you know, in all things magic. And I knew that would be a good starting point, because I think his work, for me, if we were to talk about the intervention of the muses or the fairies into people's lives, there is definitely a touch of something otherworldly about his work. And, you know, like you, Neil, nowadays, I don't think there's any poet that's really stopped me in my tracks since, you know, reading stuff as a teenager. There was nobody really in modernity that's just gone, you know, there's been a few people, like there's a guy called Ren at the minute who's a musician and a singer. He's mind blowing. But there was something otherworldly about Samuel's work. It's something otherworldly about his work.
Yep. No, absolutely fantastic. So that is the rundown of all of the guests. I hope that's all of the guests who have appeared on Hare and the Hawthorn over the years, either with just Kate or with Kate and I, and with me, Kate and I, with Kate and me. Sorry,
with Nail and I.
Let's get with Nail and I. Yeah. Don't get me started quoting with Nail and I. Garlic, rosemary, and salt. All right, let's stop that there. Uh, so, so there they are, and you know, I hope people have appreciate is just us going back, because I'm sure you know most people haven't seen all of these interviews, and we might have just sort of whetted the appetite
Mm,
for to go back and find them, and they're very easy to find. Obviously, you go on to Hare and the Hawthorn page, click the videos, and there they are in chronological order,
mm,
and you can just pick and choose from them, and ranging in obviously, like we were saying, for a time we were limited to 40 minutes, but most are about an hour, and some will go to an hour and a quarter. So it's all, you know, it's all manageable. It's not like a Joe Rogan 3.5 hour podcast, which might put people off. But most of them are an hour, so you can actually get into some of the subject matter, which I think we've done with all of the guests.
mm,
When I've been with you, talking with the guest we've had, there has not been a single instance where during the interview I'm thinking, this isn't very good.
mm,
This is not. We're not getting enough information here. Not a single instance. I really mean that. So I think that's, you know, I think this is a very good archive as it stands, and hopefully it's going to increase over the next few years. I mean, hopefully we're not going to stop, and hopefully we will carry on getting guests on. The other thing is, do remember that it's not just about guests like today's podcast and many others, dozens in the past. It's Kate and I picking a subject and talking about it. And we will definitely continue to do that, because
mm,
we can't continually get guests on. It's quite difficult to get
mm.
guests on at regular intervals. So when we can't get a guest, we will blather about whatever we want to blather about together, and
Yeah,
hope people, you know, tune in and listen.
you know, you say it's because of difficulty getting the guests on. I think we both secretly like it when it's just us two blithering on. I mean, because we do that anyway. We just catch up and have a blither about all kinds. So
Yeah,
it's nice to record it and have a bit of focus. So in the future, we have some new developments coming up for Hare in the Hawthorn. Not because we're looking to kind of expand the repertoire or anything like that. This is never going to be a corporate game for us at all. It's never going to be anything on the professional side. But just because we have light bulb moments of like, oh, that would be a good idea, or this person would be a good idea. So future wise, we have definitely got some guests who are going to be talking about fairy music, which I've been threatening to talk about for a long, long time. We have also got a lovely guy from New Zealand coming in to talk to us. I'm hoping to get another fairy artist, fairy writer from Tasmania. So we're going a bit global here. We have one or two other people lined up. I think we've got regular guests coming on. So, and like I say, me and Neil will be in between times, picking up the census, the fairy census, going through those, breaking them down, Mulder and Scully style, and trying to fathom out what's going off with all those incidents. On top of that, I'm going to be really brave. I'm going to try something that I've never ever tried before. This next month, so the month of October coming up, is crazy, crazy month for me. I mean, there is so much going off that I want to take you as viewers on a little journey with me. And I'm going to try my hand at doing some YouTube shorts. So, some little videos. Don't know whether it's going to work. You guys who watch this regularly know me and technology and how utterly rubbish I am. But they will all be fairy focused. So I'm really lucky that in a few days' time, I am going to go up to Northumberland and the borders of Scotland. So I've got our good friend Rob Wildwood's book Magical Britain with me, and I'm going to be visiting some sites. So that's going to be the start of the journey. I'm then going to be going off to Wales, so there'll be different locations in Wales that hopefully I'll take you on the journey with me. And obviously in Glastonbury, it'd be nice to do some shorts from Glastonbury, and just have a hello with Thomas and Neil and everybody in a live situation, as in all sat in the same
that
bloody
that that
room.
could that could work very well. We can get a table out the back of the Georgian
Oh,
Pilgrims
yes.
after a few pints in. It'll be brilliant.
it'll be brilliant or a disaster, but either way, it's going to be genius. So yeah, that's kind of where we're heading. I've, like I said on part one, we have set up a Hare and Hawthorn community YouTube page on Facebook. That is newly launched. Please feel free to go on there and chat about anything that we've been talking about. Say hello. There's lots of people who watch this channel who I would love you all to say hello. I would love to know who you all are. And it feels like, you know, we sit down now and we're in this comfortable, really nice, comfortable community. And I don't think we haven't had any trolling for a while. I think we had a little flutter at one stage, but so I feel like we have a like-minded community. It'd be nice to sort of get together on Facebook and get to know each other a bit better. And it's a platform that both Neil and I know pretty well how to handle and manage. So we can pop on there and sort of interject and say hello and
have you made it public yet?
yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I've shared it
if
today.
okay. Oh, I haven't seen that. So, but if other people haven't seen that, they can just search Hare and Hawthorn. I'm sure it'll be there will only be one. There's only one Hare and Hawthorn.
I've got about 5 pages under Hare and the Hawthorn.
Oh
So
God.
just go past Hare of the Hawthorn herbs. That was years ago, and I need to get rid of that, and I don't know how to take it down. This is how rubbish I am at technology. There's Hare in the Hawthorn, which is my artwork and the mushrooms that I make. Go and have a look at that, check it out. It's not up to date though, but it's the kind of thing that I sit and make when I'm not doing this. And then there's another Hare in the Hawthorn because it's my kind of umbrella brand for my creativity. So everything goes under this branding.
All right. I'm sure people can work it out. You know, which is the
You're
most
all
recent one.
intelligent. You're
Yeah.
all intelligent. You'll all do it. You'll all do it. So I think we've come to the close of the hundredth and one episode.
Yes. Yeah. No. Happy 100th to Hare and the Hawthorn, and sorry that this was broken into two parts, but I'm sure people will forgive us. And you know, it's obviously, you know, they'll go out at the same time, and so obviously watch part one first. And if
Yes.
you, so I'm saying this now, you know, someone at the end of part two, oh, there's a part one,
Yeah.
but yeah, but you know, technology just blasts us sometimes, and we've had to do it in two parts, which is not ideal. But you know, hopefully people have had a bit of an insight about how Hare and Hawthorn started and how it's grown over the years.
Yeah. And yeah, it's been really nice to sit back over the last few days and go down memory lane. And I think for me, the biggest thing has been appreciating not only the guests that have come on and you for kind of sticking with Hare in the Hawthorn, but also the viewers. You know, it's I often forget when we're sat here sort of talking and you know with guests and stuff that, and it boggles my mind. It boggles my mind that people are really loyal to Hare in the Hawthorn, you know, and stick with it. And yeah, so thank you very much to everybody, including yourself, Neil, for the commitment. And we'll see you all very soon.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.